Today's song is All of Me in the style of Billie Holiday. All of me, why not take all of me? Can't you see I'm no good without you? Take my lips, I want to lose them. Take my arms, I'll never use them. Your goodbye, well, left me with eyes that cry. How can I go on without you? You took the part that once was my heart, so why not take all of me? All of me, why not take all of me? Can't you see I'm no good without you? Take my lips, I want to lose them. Take my arms, I'll never use them. Your goodbye, well, left me with eyes that cry. How can I go on without you? You took that part that once was my heart, so why not take all of me?
Yes. Okay. First of all, that's why I'm gonna have to stop doing that whole like right when my minister of flavor and musical vibes, like she hits a note and then that's like I gotta follow it up with a yeah, like some kind of notes out for real, for like a preacher, but like in the jazz setting, like with the cool flavor. Woohoo! Hey fam, I am Alexis Roan, aka Alexis Grace, founder of Truth Meets Story LLC, expanding empathy one story at a time, and the host of Jesus, Jazz, and Dessert Wine. And I'm sitting here putting all of my little notes and stuff together. So I do this really interesting thing. It might sound crazy to y'all, but it keeps me secure and sane and just kind of, living in my flow. I cover the watch count. The reason why I do that is because sometimes it's like, oh my God, like we've been doing all this promoting and ain't nobody on here. And that's not even what this is about. Number one, by recording it online, by doing it live and then keeping it up as a recording online, you can go and watch it anytime that you get available. So I realize that while I'm like all about Vespers in this particular time, as well as I do have a core group of folk that are like, look, it's time for church. The church that we can drink wine and listen to jazz music. That's the flavor. Now, this is my flavor. This is how I flow. But there is actually there's a congregation in San Francisco, I think it's an Episcopal church. They do this thing called the Beyonce mask. What am I trying to say? There are so many different ways in which what you think are, quote, pop culture icons or pop culture references or whatever, it is finding its way into the faith community. Or is it that the faith community is expanding to be more inclusive, to say, hey, listen, God shows up in so many interesting and different ways. So I'm going to one of these days hit up that Beyonce mask. Of course, when we're no longer in the pandemic. Yeah, I'm going to do that. But until then, I'm going to keep on keeping on with Jesus, Jazz, and Dessert Wine, a weekly faith and adult storytelling series. By faith, I mean, we explore, the mystery of how God shows up, and we communicate that through adult storytelling. By adult storytelling, I mean stories that are told to adults, for adults, by adults, to people with a developed adult context. 7-year-olds have a story time, and now so do adults. You're welcome. So I am super excited about today because the storyteller, our featured storyteller, was extremely popular last season. She was someone who is, most definitely, committed to the art of telling stories, and then for making room for other people's stories as well. I'm gonna have her promote this this series that she's also curating. It's a gathering opportunity, and so I love how we are not wasting this time. Yeah, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Yeah, we would like to be able to gather live, but like my mama said, I also want to live. Hey, mama, if you're on there, I don't know if my mama's on here yet, but hey, mama, if you're here. So I'm going to co-sign on what my mama says, that we need to live and to survive through this thing. And until that time, what we're going to do is we're going to come together virtually, and we're going to keep it moving. We're going to figure out how to get it in. So I was thinking about, my grandmothers, my paternal grandmother and my maternal grandmother. My grandma Carrie she lived in California, and my grandma Sophie lived in a little small town called Cedar Lake, Texas. And I was so blessed to have both of them in my lives. Both of them in my life. I was closer. I've had more time with my grandma Sophie because, my grandma Carrie lived in California and I grew up in Texas. And, so I don't think I even got to really spend time with her, getting to know her until I was about 13, if I'm not mistaken. But she was a sweet, sweet, sweet woman. Loved Jesus, loved the church, and I loved spending time with her. And so I was always going with her to whenever she was going out to the church, whether it was for the prayer meeting, for the youth meeting, like all the grandkids who were there that summer had to go to the youth meeting, but we didn't all have to go to the prayer meeting. I loved to be with her to go to the prayer meeting. I remember one time I was at the prayer meeting, and I've always been really sensitive, concerning and attuned to faith-oriented issues, to just to my spirit. And so it was nothing for me to hear something said, something prayed, and respond. We're at a prayer meeting in California, and I was I was crying and just kind of processing everything. And then at the end, everybody is hugging. I remember the pastor kind of looking at me strange, and then his wife looking at me strange. But then it was their little 5-year-old little girl, Lizzie. When I was trying to hug her, she says, "You have a booger in your nose." And I was like, damn it. Couldn't nobody else tell me that the reason why they were looking at me strange was because my nose was all chalked up with some stuff that needed to be clean? So grown people, I'm gonna need y'all to do better by the children. If my nose is jacked up, hand us a Kleenex on the line, signal something. So that was one of and I continue to go. I continue to be a part of the prayer experience. I just had some Kleenex with me. I kept tissues with me because I never knew how I was going to respond. I just knew that I was going to always keep it real. Whatever I was feeling, I was going to go with that. My grandma Sophie, on the other hand, she also loved church, and she was there, with every service. We'd have to go to Sunday school, and we'd get there. And one of the Sunday school teachers, he was an old man, Mr. Joel. And I think at the time he was teaching, maybe he was 99 at that, seriously, he wasn't just he was really, really an old man, and he was a prolific teacher, and he loved to teach, but he's old, and he's standing up there, and his voice is really slow and low, and we're trying to hear that. And so I'm looking around, and I'm like, am I the only one that can't hear, what he's saying? But of course I can't say that, because everybody else is sitting there quiet and reverent, and they taking it all in. And, Mr. Joel, rest his soul, He loved Jesus, loved to teach, and grandma loved to be in the house of the Lord, for the Sunday school service, and then on for the Sunday for Sunday school, and then on into the church service. And I just wanted to be with her, so we did that. But what was interesting about both of my grandmothers as I got older, my grandma Carrie, who was a person who she would travel for the Christian women's conferences, the big conferences that came up around California. And they knew Mama Carrie, like she was going to be there. And when she got older and she just decided that she didn't enjoy traveling, it was just, too much, like, to sit still and, she'd nap off and that kind of thing. She was like, okay, look, I did all that when I was younger. And now that I'm older, they know I love you. They know I love them. So, but I'm going to cease attending. Still love Jesus, still went to church. But she added this new thing to her repertoire, and it was a pleasant surprise. I go to her house and, visiting. I think at the time I was living in Phoenix, I was able to drive, she was like, we were literally like 4 hours and 1 minute apart. So I drive to California, go to her house, and at 5:30, she would turn on the TV, not for the news, but for the Bernie Mac show. And I was like, wait, my hyper-religious grandma is watching Bernie Mac? And I was like, wait, she grew up and all of a sudden she got all this flavor. Now she can handle Bernie Mac. And so I'm like, he'd make some body joke and I'd, look over there like, is it okay for me to laugh at this? And then she'd be like shaking her head, chuckling. She's like, he's so silly. Now, what she could not tolerate though was the commercials. As soon as they would like go to commercial, she'd turn the TV off. And then we'd just be sitting there in silence, and maybe we'd talk a little bit. And I'd be like, okay, grandma, maybe like the show is back on. She put click the TV back on. And if it was still a commercial, click. I was like, what? She grows old and gets this flavor, and we get to watch Bernie Mac together. And I'm just enjoying her very much. And then my grandma Sophie, we had this thing. Now, Grandma Sophie was more touchy with her, because on top of, her being at church every time the doors were open, she had these preacher sons and grandsons, like all of her, all the men that she gave birth to. And then the women that married men, everybody preaching. And so she would come to Houston and she would visit, and I would always take her away from everybody. And nobody knew what we were doing. But we had this thing where we would go to Bennigan's, which was a pub in Houston, little bar and grill, neighborhood bar and grill. We go to Bennigan's and we drink margaritas and eat their buffalo wings with blue cheese. That was our thing. And for a long time, we couldn't tell anybody because she didn't want nobody to know that she was drinking. And she probably would be like, I can't believe this girl is out here putting my business on the street. I was like, Grandma, look, we all drinking the margaritas. I don't know why. Can't we all just admit that we like margaritas? Like, we in Texas. Come on. But that was our thing. We would go, I'd pick her up and I just take her off, and I ain't tell nobody. I don't even think I told my mother where we were going. They were just like, oh, okay, Lexus and, Grandma going to spend some time together. I'm like, yep. We didn't get drunk because I was driving, precious cargo. But we got nice. And I love that as we got older, that both of them just kind of chillaxed. So I think I have found that sort of chillax place way before them. Even my mama has said to me that after for her 60th birthday party, I've shown the video of her dancing. 10 years later, she's looking at it, and her commentary was, I wish I'd have shook my booty more. And I was like, now that's what I'm talking about. Aging is a beautiful thing. When you learn that it's okay to laugh at bawdy comedians, it's okay to drink margaritas with your granddaughter, and it's okay that when you on the stage and you're dancing, everybody shake your booty a little more. So, FYI, those are hashtag good tips. Listen, I'm so glad that you're with us tonight, because our featured storyteller has an amazing, the way she shows up in story is really beautiful. It is, it's spiritual, it's connected. And all I wanted her to do was to just tell me the story, because she's one of those ones who will definitely have, the outcome and what she wanted. But where it gets rich and deep, and where I think you're really going to be blessed, is in the actual story. So please welcome Miss Tecca Thompson as she dresses her truth in story.
It was about a year ago when my friend Sharon brought me this beautiful Sankofa necklace back from Africa. Now, Sankofa means to go back and learn from the lessons of the past. So I wasn't too surprised that right around the time that I received my Sankofa, I started to have this desire to tell story. See, my grandfather, Wallace Thompson, was an amazing natural storyteller. He would captivate crowds everywhere he went. My granddad was tall, dark, and handsome. He wore a brim hat and he smoked a cigar. If I close my eyes and picture his face, I can smell his cigar and hear his voice. Just like whenever one of us grandkids would do something really cool, my grandfather would say, "Well, all right." Now, when I was growing up, my relationship with my grandfather was a little complicated. He was my paternal grandfather, and my parents had separated when I was really young. So that meant that I didn't really get a chance to spend that much time with my grandfather. But I always knew that my grandfather was there for me. Like the time when I was in the 7th grade, he bought me my very first pair of real basketball shoes. And the significance in that purchase is that later on, I went on to become a USA Today high school All-American in girls basketball. Or like the time shortly after he passed away, my grandfather came to me in a vision while I was meditating. And in the vision, he reached out his hand to me. And when I grabbed it, we began to float up. And then we came to a beautiful bridge. Now, my granddad, he walked out ahead of me and crossed halfway over the bridge. And then he said, "Come on." I was looking like, whoa, wait a minute. But I met him on the bridge and he grabbed my hand again and we crossed over into this big open area. And in this open area, there were all of these beautiful spirit beings. And they weren't scary or creepy or anything like that. As a matter of fact, it felt like love. And these spirit beings began to gather around me and surround me. And it just felt like a warm feeling of love. Now, when I woke up or came out of the meditation, I was just like, well, that was so weird. And I even was like, "Grandpa, what are you trying to tell me? Am I about to die?" And so I never really thought much about it because I just couldn't make any understanding of it. So I just kind of filed it away. And like I said, I never really thought much about it until this moment. But overall, what I thought was, what an amazing way for me to honor the life of my grandfather than to tell my own stories, to go back and learn the craft that he was so amazing. And so I started telling my own stories. Now, I knew when I stepped up to start telling stories that in addition to honoring the legacy of my grandfather, Wallace Thompson's life, I knew that I would have to tell the story of my accident. When I was 10 years old, I was in a horrific bike accident. Now, the bike accident was just the bookend to a really horrible year for me. My mom was a single mom by that time, and she was distracted, busy doing life, which left me feeling unwanted, uncared for, and basically kind of invisible. I remember one day towards the end of the school year, all of that anger inside of me just exploded. My teacher, Mrs. Reinbold, had left the room to run an errand, and she left me in charge because I was a good kid. I never got into trouble. But as I stood at the chalkboard, cleaning the chalkboard, something snapped inside of me, and I began to throw things. I threw chalk, I threw erasers, I tipped over chairs. And I picked up a chalk container and I flung it across the room, and it hit one of my classmates. And I remember seeing how it hit her face. Ironically, her name was Rita, and she had red hair. My mom's name is Rita. She also has red hair. But when it hit her face, she jumped back. And I remember, just like it was yesterday, I had absolutely no feelings inside of me. That's how angry I was. I didn't care that I hurt her. Well, I ran out of the classroom, and as I was running down the hallway, I ran right into Mrs. Reinbold. And I kept telling her, I want to go home. And inside of my head, I was like, no, you really don't want to go home. But she said, what's the matter? And I said, I just want to go home. And she said, hold on, I'm going to go look in the classroom. She went inside of the classroom, and when she came back, she said, I think you do need to go home. And I broke down and began to sob because I didn't really want to go home. And I looked up at her, and her face softened, and she saw the fear in me. So she sent me down to the office where I got to sit with one of my church aunties, Aunt Tiny, all day. And no one ever told my mom. So things just continue to go on the way that they were, me feeling invisible, and nothing ever happened. So for me, I like to describe my accident as a metaphor. It was the day my little 10-year-old body could no longer hold all of those intense emotions inside of me, and they exploded inside of my body. But what really happened is that I was struck by a van and dragged 72 feet on the concrete, suffering extensive internal injuries. My spleen was ruptured. I had 2 collapsed lungs, several broken ribs, 2nd and 3rd degree burns on my hands, arms, face, and I also had swelling on my brain. But I remember that day, my cousin Stevie was babysitting me, and she was a little bit older, and she said, let's go on a bike ride. It was the first week of summer vacation, 1978. And we hopped on our bikes, and we rode all the way across town, and it was just an amazing adventure for me. As we headed back, we came to an intersection on the corner of 6th Street and Diamond. And Stevie had crossed the intersection. And I remember looking up at the light, and it was red. And I started to take my bike across the intersection, and I saw a white van in the intersection. And as I went out into the intersection, that's the last thing I remember. But later on, I was told, as I was laying on the ground, on that same corner of 6th and Diamond, there was a barber shop, and there was also a beauty salon. But there was also a small church, Maddox Memorial Church of God in Christ, and they were having Vacation Bible School. And all of the people came out to see what was going on. Some of my classmates were there, and they saw me, they recognized me, they knew who I was. But the amazing thing that happened is that they began to organize a citywide prayer chain for me. And I remember this was 1978. I was told that by the time I made it to the hospital, there were churches all across the city, white churches, Black churches. People were praying for the little girl who got hit by the van. Now, again, remember, it's 1978. They did this without cell phones, the internet, or social media. It was God. God orchestrated that. Now, I remember waking up in the hospital that day, and I couldn't see anything but a big, bright light above my head. No, not like cross over into the light. Think more like a large surgical light. But I could hear voices. And from the voices in the room, I could tell that my family had gathered around me. I could hear my Aunt Nene. I could hear my mom, My cousin Mike was in the room, and even my dad was in the room. And I remember having a conversation with my cousin Mike because they were rushing me into an emergency surgery. I had to have my ponytail holders taken out of my head. And so I told him, you hold on to these ponytail holders because I'm coming home. And my cousin Mike wore those ponytail holders around his wrist for 3 weeks while I recovered in the hospital. A little while later, my pastor came into the room, Pastor William Morse, and Pastor Morse said, let's pray. And I remember saying, I already talked to God. He said I was going to be okay. Now, I don't recall if I really talked to God on that day, but I like to think that I did because I'm here today sharing this amazing story, honoring the life of my grandfather, Wallace, with you all. Now, the only voice I don't remember hearing in the room that day was the voice of my grandfather. And to the best of my memory, I don't recall him coming to visit me while I was in the hospital recovering. But what I was later told is that because of all of the injuries I suffered, I needed a blood transfusion. And my grandfather was the only match. And my grandfather donated all of the blood that saved my life that day. Now, I was also told that not only did he donate blood once, but when he was able to donate again, he came back to the hospital and donated a second time. And he told the hospital staff that this blood is for my granddaughter in case she needs some more. So when I began to gather all of the pieces and memories together for this story, I first thought that it was going to be about anger. That anger that I felt as a 10-year-old child who felt unseen. But the Sankafa message that my grandfather wanted me to go back and get was that as a child and now, I've always been wanted. I've always been cared for. And just like in the emergency room that day and in the vision with my grandfather, I've always been surrounded by love.
Wow. I was like just mesmerized the whole time. Just the miracle that was happening. Star just posted this comment, and I think that this probably captures what I think what I was feeling closest to, how blood equals love. You know, in this story, just all of that. That was so beautiful. You know, I know we have been trying to get you to tell this story for some time, and you were like, no, this story's like, no. And every time you resisted, I assumed it was because it was some sort of trigger, like it was a negative thing. Like it never, now who is that that's been trying to that's been loving up on you this whole time? Somebody's in the room with you now.
Oh, my dog.
I was like, I keep hearing something, but I didn't hear the dog bark. Oh, Stainless said, I've always been wanted. I've always been loved. There it is. That is such a powerful way to end this story. Thank you, Tecca. Thank you for sharing. And I'm so grateful that you saved this story for this moment. This was the right time. Absolutely. All right, let me go ahead and put you behind in the backstage real quick. Wow. That was a lot. One of my friends, my former church it was my first ministry assignment in Phoenix, Arizona. She was online. Of course, they've been meeting virtually. And there was another woman who had told a story about a series of different things that had happened. And then she typed in the chat, damn. And then she had to edit it and say, I guess I can't be saying damn in church. But when she was describing like being drug and burns and all that kind of stuff, I was like, damn, that's a lot. That is a lot. And yet there she stands with no markers of that, just the memory. I have always been wanted. I have always been loved. That is, oh man, that is such a beautiful thing, such a beautiful recognition. Okay, so 4 things that we do here at Jesus Jazz and Dessert Wine. First is we offer a public lament. And so here's what happened to me this week. My grandmother, my maternal grandmother, my grandma Sophie, used to say, when children are young, they sit on your lap. And when they are older, they sit on your heart. And this week, although I don't have children, I do have immense amounts of love for young people who are in my life. And this week, I got some information that made me cry extremely hard twice. And it put me in a very difficult space because what I was doing after hearing this information, and mind you, if you're in your 20s, I have this thing where I'm like, listen, I forgive you in advance for all that you do. True. But the other part of that is when you make a choice today, that choice has a future. And so I was concerned for the future of the choices that were being made. And all I could do was cry. And the other thing I did was I created scary narratives concerning this future. You're a handsome young man and you are out there meeting young women and they get pregnant and you ain't got no money. And children, they don't like subsist on air. And so you have just created a situation that the burden will fall on the woman. And so we were talking and, this young person was like, well, that's just you're a feminist. That's why you take this side. I'm like, I'm not taking anybody's side. Like, I love you. I love them. I want the best for all of you. I want you to be aware of how your present choices have a future. So, live carefully. And I wasn't sure that was enough, like that I had said enough, or even that what I had said would make a difference. And I realized that the real issue was the narrative that I was creating. I kept creating a scary narrative. And I think it's Walter Brueggemann who said, hope is created by speech. And so we have to recognize that there is power in language. And so the scary narrative that I was creating, I needed to watch my language. I needed to flip all of that. And I needed to now start to create, using the power of language, the world and the scenario that I wanted to play out in baby boy's life and his children's life and the lives of the children's mothers. I just began to speak a word of hope, crafting a completely different space. But I also recognize that the fear that I have is real and I don't need to dismiss it in any way. Every day I read an excerpt of Audre Lorde's poem, A Litany for Survival. And she's talking about all of these different ways in which Black women are fearful. And she paints like 3 different scenarios in this poem, A Litany for Survival. And then like sort of midway through the poem, she says, for those of us imprinted with fear, like a faint line in the center of our foreheads, the heavy-footed hoped to silence us. And then she begins to go through all of the ways in which our fear manifests itself. It's like you're afraid that if the sun rises, it won't, and it sets, it won't come up again. You're afraid that if you eat to your satisfaction, you're afraid of indigestion. You're afraid if you don't eat, you'll never eat again. And so she's just painting all of these different scenarios about what fear looks like and the kinds of realities and scary pictures that we paint with fear. And then she said, and when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard nor welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak. A Litany for Survival by Audre Lorde. I realized that all of the ways that I kept saying, like this scary story and this big, bad, thing is going to happen, with him and with them. And with all of that, I flipped it. I recognized that fear had been given to me, but I could speak a word of hope. And I had the absolute best time when I began to rewrite their narrative and began to proclaim that everybody was going to come up and there was going to be love and reconciliation, not because I am ignorant of what life looks like on life's terms, but because I know the power of language. I know the power of language to craft hope. Through Tecca's story, I know the power of prayer. In my own life, I know the power of prayer. And so instead of hanging on to these scary narratives that we are fed, speak a word of hope. Hope creates speech. When we're silent, we're still afraid. So it is better to speak and to declare that, be hope, to write that hopeful narrative. Ashe. And then my energizing memory, it actually comes from the Celebration LA 2015. Celebration LA is an international, a worldwide storytelling festival where storytelling sets, different adult storytelling sets are staged around the world. And it's put on by the National Storytelling Network. And so I got permission to stage Celebration LA, actually 2014 and 2015. And then I also staged Celebration Dallas, I think also in 2015, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, it was called The Illuminated Script. It was done at an art gallery, not an art gallery, an art studio in downtown LA. My friend Cindy owned it. She's an amazing artist. Pre-pandemic, she ended up having to sell the property, and she's now in New Mexico doing amazing things. But when I think about all of the ways that I thought that it couldn't get better, I have continued to press on and to reflect and to allow my energizing memories to keep me connected and to keep me pushing and to keep me doing that. And my prayer is that you are doing the exact same thing. One of my friends this week, we were talking. He's a faithful attendee here to Jesus Jazz and Dessert Wine. And I see you, Cindy. Cindy was like, I'm part of the faithful crew too. You are absolutely right, sis. I promise you are. But a friend of mine that I was talking with this week, in the middle of our conversation, he's like, and in my energizing memory, and I was like, he's listening. He's listening, he's taking notes, and it's carrying. So please engage your memories and let them be the source of hope that causes you to be contagious and to speak the right words and to cancel all of them scary narratives. Just reflect back on your energizing memories and go and live hope. And then finally, in giving. So here's the thing. When we talk about giving, a lot of times folks, particularly in faith-based spaces, are like, give money, give money, give money. This week, I pray that you would focus on giving compliments. Do you know how good people feel when someone, either someone you know or just a perfect stranger, just comes up and you give them a compliment? It's like they feel seen and they feel affirmed. It is too easy for us to not do. Give compliments, give grace, give space, give opportunities, give contracts, give money if you have it. I think I'd shared with you once before how I have this new practice of keeping cash on me so that when I see someone on the street, if I'm sitting at the stoplight or whatever, I don't want to just look and wave. I don't want to paint a narrative that says that they're going to waste that money. You know what? The money that I'm giving them, it belongs to the Lord. And I am a conduit of that. And in my sanctified imagination, the story that I tell is the one that Jesus told in the gospel. He was like, listen, you're going to go on the other side of eternity, and I'm going to thank you for visiting me when I was in prison. I'm going to thank you for that meal. I'm like, Lord, when did I visit you in prison? When did I give you a meal? And Jesus said, when you did it to the least of those. That's the standard. And so that money don't belong to me, don't belong to you. So give it up. Bless somebody. Be fruitful, be contagious in these very healthy practices. We need each other. The hands that are attached to our body are the very ones that God uses to get the work done. We co-create with God by using these hands and the resources that God has given us. So be generous in your giving today. And before we go to our blessing and our sending, next week, we have two storytellers that are going to be up. Donna Sheely. She is a radio personality in Atlanta. And Tenian Lanimi Ayo Ario is going to be the second feature. So it's going to be a double header next week, and it is going to be powerful because these two women are incredible storytellers, and they have the sweetest, most innocent experiences that they're going to share with us that happened when they were children. So I cannot, okay, let's see here. Somebody says, give money, give grace, give compliments, give. Yes, Stainless gets it. Thank you. So I want you to just practice fidelity to healthy practices. We need each other, y'all. We do. And, we got each other. Everything is working out. Everything we need. Mom says, God uses my hands to get the work done. Hallelujah. Absolutely. That's how it gets done. And just as an aside before we close, last week, I talked with you about reading or skimming the book of Amos for all of the verses that I had highlighted. Well, this week I actually read the full chapter 5, where I was actually pulling the scripture from, where it says a flood of justice and an endless river of righteous living. So when I read the entire chapter, I realized that everything that was being for which they were being dinged, where the prophet was that God was dinging them. It was things that they did. It was like, okay, you are in control of whether or not you tell the truth. You are in control over whether or not you cheat people. You are in control over whether or not you accept a bribe. Like, these are things that you control. And so the verse actually says, like, I don't want to hear your noisy hymns. I don't want to hear you're all pious and your fancy celebration. None of that. I don't even want your sacrifices. That's not what I'm after. He's like, here's what I want. I want a flood of justice and an endless river of righteous living. And so I thought all of it is within our control. What we do, what we don't do. So let's be careful to practice good things. Just doing good things. Do the right thing. And we're going to have an honorable legacy. We will indeed partner with God in Tikkun Olam in healing the world. It's going to be these hands that's going to do it. Put your hands up. Don't just be looking at my hands like, okay, Lord, you got Lex's hands. No. All hands on deck. Get it done. Do for others what you want done for you. And in that way, the whole law is being fulfilled. Okay. Husa, next week, 5:30, Tenny and Lanimi and Donna going to be on deck. You're going to love their stories. They are super sweet and innocent and beautiful, as are the storytellers. And your host too, aka Pippi Longstocking. Okay, that's a whole other thing. I've used that term quite a bit this week. This has been a really good week, by the way, and I'll fill y'all in on some of the amazing things that have happened once I sign those contracts. Like, once everything is finalized, I will. I'm looking forward to that. But until then, the blessing. You have been in this space where you have been exposed to the truth that was dressed in story. You have heard the prophetic hope. You have heard the lament. You have heard the energizing memory and thoughts on giving. And in each one of those spaces, you hold your own beliefs, your own practices, your own formations of what that looks like. My prayer is that this week you will practice fidelity to all of that, what you believe. That from this space you have gleaned something good, something that that is contagious, and you can go out and happily infect the world with that goodness. The standard, the commandment is to love. It is not an option. May love lead us towards creative solutions. Ashe, Selah, so be it. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week, 5:30 p.m. EST. Invite a friend, like and share this video on your different platforms. And if you are interested in learning how to tell your story, hit me up, alexisroan.com. Blessings, fam. We'll see you next week.